Captain's Log number 3. So I filmed 3 of these in the same sitting because I think that these 3 prongs are equally as important. So where the game came from, the narrative, and finally the features. So the features of the game broken down into, I guess, the star map. So a multiplayer game of Terratorial will probably take place in space, and you are using an armada of ships which all have different abilities. You are exploring the map, you are capturing planets, and you are obviously fighting your opponent. The ships can range from being very military focused, so very focused on defeating the opponent. They can also be territory focused, because a lot of Terratorial is about taking territory and then stealing planets from other people. So it's about the positioning of these planets, and we'll come back to planets soon. And some of the ship types are also based on your resources. So your resources, we've broken down into 3. You have population, which is how many people you have available to work. You have materials, which is how many materials you've got to work with. Some games have multiple types of materials, we just have the one. And we have production, which is how fast you are working on things, how fast you can get things done. So too do we have these 3 different types of planets which are based on those resources. So you have a planet that is mostly based on population, a planet that is based on materials, and a planet that increases production. The ships that you unlock with these 3 resources, they're unlocked through a very basic technology tree. So if you go down one of these 3 routes, you'll be unlocking ships that kind of work with one of those types of resources. And those ships are built within the corresponding planet. Finally, we have a capital planet. So the capital planet is the one that you start with. It's where you build the ships that can expand outwards, the settlers. And it's also where you perform these technology tree upgrades. So all of the tech upgrades are in one place, and then those upgrades affect your entire space civilization. So the territory stealing mechanic is based on something called jerry weight. So we have a ship called the Gerrymanderer. The Gerrymanderer picks up a planet, and you can move it and you can place it somewhere else, wherever you want that to be, whether or not it's closer to your opponent or stealing a opponent's planet and putting it within your territory. Taking a planet from someone else and putting it in your territory flips that planet to then become your planet. You own it. And I presume it's down to some kind of outdated space law that we didn't quite have time to patch up. You can also flip territory with a ship called a Walker, which is much more destructive. It breaks down the buildings one by one, and then at the end you're left with an empty planet that is under your control. The game modes in Terratorial vary quite a lot, and I've spoken a bit about this before, but depending on the game mode that you're going for, whether or not it's like a King of the Hill, like a Capture the Flag, a territory game mode, that will dictate what kind of playstyle you have, whether or not you're focusing more on territory or whether or not you're focusing more on military. We hope that these game modes will help you have a really varied experience every time you pick up the game. And if you say, hey, maybe I'm a little bit tired of drilling territory game modes, well, then there's going to be plenty more military focused game modes that you can play with. In all, you can see how the game is taking some of the strengths of other RTSs, but at all times trying to keep it fresh and interesting. And as a side note, I think that one of the strongest parts of this idea is just the fact that the planets are like your bases. In RTSs, you might build out to bases, but very generally they're static, right? But all of our planets are orbiting, so they are moving. So there might be points in the game that your planets align, almost like a star sign or something. There might be points that your planets align, and it gives you an advantage for that point, but it's not all the time. Maybe there'll be a point where your planet is closer to someone else, and that means that then they can aggress on it. And then there's this other element of like orbit-based timing and strategy for both you and your opponent. And that is just some of the key features of Terratorial. We're hoping that we can work on improving all of these, making them incredibly fun to jump in and play and experiment with, and hopefully it will form part of this RTS playground that we're trying to build. And if any of this at all sounds interesting to you, I would really ask that you follow along and you check it out, and you find us on territorial-game.com and follow our socials, etc. And hopefully I'll see you again soon.